Hello, welcome back. Today we're discussing Chapter 6, Lesson 1, Fractions, Decimals, and Percents. So let's go ahead and start with our first example, Example 1, writing decimals as percents. Now when we do this, we're going to discuss two different ways to do this problem. We're going to have the first method, and then we're going to work on the second method here. So the first method, we have 0.7. We're going to write that as a percent. So what we know about 0.7, this is the same thing as the tenths place right here. So we can rewrite this as a fraction as 7/10. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that 7/10. Now, what we know about percentages is that a percentage, let's say if I have an example like 25%. That is the same thing as 25 over 100. So that is the fraction equivalent. So in this, what we have is we have a decimal. We started with a decimal. We're going to convert that into a fraction. And once we have our fraction, we are going to convert that into our percentage. Now, the fraction, what we want to do is we want to get a fraction that is over 100. So right now, is this 7/10? Is that over 100? No, it is not. So we want to make this 10 into 100. Well, how do we make this 10 into 100? Well, pretty simple. We just multiply it by 10. 10 times 10 is 100, and now we have our fraction out of 100. Well, we have to remember, whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. And we can do that because 10 divided by 10 is the same thing as 1. Okay, so we can multiply any number by 1, and we get the same number. It's just in a different form. So we saw that we had 0.7. That's our decimal. We converted it into a fraction, which is 7/10. And now we're going to get that denominator to be 100. So 10 times 10 is 100, 7 times 10 is 70, and now we know that 70 out of 100 is the same thing as 70%. So that is how we convert a decimal into a percentage. You go from a decimal to a fraction, you make that fraction out of 100, and then you convert it to a percentage. All right, perfect. Now let's go on the second way to do the same thing. So we have this decimal right here, 0.7. And then what we're going to do is we're going to, since we have a decimal and we know that this is the tenths place, well, we want it out of the hundredths place because we know that if we have something in the hundredths place, that it's the same thing, everything for a percentage is out of 100. So just like we did this, 25%, that's the same thing as 25 hundredths, right? Which is the same thing as 0.25, 25 hundredths. This is the tenths place. This is the hundredths place. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and rewrite this decimal so it goes to the hundredths place. This is the tenths place. And so we need this to go to the hundredths place. Well, there's nothing there. So what do we put there when there's nothing there? Well, we put a 0. Okay, so now we have 0.70. And to convert this to a percentage, what you do is when you have a decimal and you're going straight to a percentage, you move the decimal 2 places to the right. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to move this decimal 2 places to the right. So this would be 1, this would be 2. This is where our new decimal goes, and it becomes 70%. Okay, let's go ahead and try this on another example. Check it out, example 1A. We have 0.3. So I want you to do this problem with both methods. Method 1 and method 2. Okay, so go ahead and check it out. Example 1A. When you get done with 1A, we're going to come back and check and see how you did. So go ahead and pause. When you get done with method 1 and method 1 and method 2, go ahead and press play and we'll go over your results. Okay, see you in a bit. See you in a bit. All right, we're back. Let's go ahead and see. So method 1 is that we have this decimal, 0.3. We have the decimal. We write it as a fraction with the denominator of 100, and then we convert it to a percentage. Okay? So here we go. We have, this is 0.3, which is the same thing as 3/10. Okay? We're going to convert it to a fraction with a denominator of 100, which means we need to multiply the bottom and the top by 10. We end up with 10 times 10, which is 100, and 3 times 10, which is 30, and we know that 30 over 100 is the same thing as 30%. Okay, now let's go ahead and do the second method. So we have 0.3 again. All right, we know we're just going to go from a decimal to a percentage. Now, in order to do that, we know that this is the tenths place. We need something in the hundredths place. So there's nothing there. We're going to put that 0 there. So now we have 0.30. And the rule states that all we need to do is move this decimal 2 places to the right. We end up with 30%. So 2 different ways to do the same thing. So if you got that one right, great job. Let's go ahead and we're going to do the same thing for check it out, example 1B. I want you to do method 1 and method 2. Okay? So where's our friend, the pause? Oh, here's the pause dragon. Remind you to pause, work this out. When you get done, press play and we'll talk about it. Okay, we're back. We have 0.93. Let's see how you did. The first thing is to go ahead. We have this decimal. We're going to write it as a fraction and then convert it to a percentage. Okay? So for this one, this is the tenths place here, and this is the hundredths place. The great thing about this is we can just go ahead and write this as a fraction with the denominator of 100 because it's in the hundredths place. Tenths, hundredths. So this is the same thing as 93 hundredths, which is the same thing as 93%. Okay, let's work on method 2. We have 0.93. All right, we're just going to go from the decimal straight to the percentage. Okay, so with that, the rule states that when you have a decimal and you want to go straight to a percentage, you can just move this decimal places 2 places to the right. And it's already right there with a 3, so we can just go 1, 2, and we have 93%. So 2 different ways to do the same thing. If you got that right, great job. All right, let's move on to example 2. Now, we're also going to do, we have fractions here. So we're going to write fractions as decimals, and we're going to do it 2 different ways. Method 1 and also method 2. So let's go ahead and start with method 1. They call this in your textbook using the pencil and paper method. So what we want to remember is that when we have 3 over 25, that is the same thing as saying we can just, that 3 divided by 25. So to divide 3 by 25, use long division and place a decimal point followed by a 0 after the 5. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to use our long division here, and we're going to take the fraction. We're going to convert it to a decimal, and once we have a decimal, then we're going to convert it to a percentage. Okay? So let's go ahead and do the long division. I'm going to do it over here. So 3 divided by 25. 3 divided by 25. So this isn't right. Don't look at that. That's incorrect. They messed up on that. Okay, that's unfortunate. Okay, so yeah, so don't look at that. That's wrong. Okay, so let's go for it right here. 3 is divided by 25. Okay, so can 25 go into 3? No, it cannot, so we need to add a 0. Can 25 go into 30? Yes, it can. I'm going to put the decimal place right above. It can go in 1 time. Then we do our multiplication. 1 times 25 is 25. We subtract. I have to borrow, making that a 2. 10 take away 5 is 5. Okay, then we're not done. We need to add another 0 and drop it off because there was that remainder of 5. So now does 25 go into 50? Yes, it does. How many times? 2 times. 2 times 5 is 10. Write the 0, carry the 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, and there's no remainder, so we're done. So we know that this fraction can be written as a decimal, 0.12. And I know from the previous example that this is the tenths place, this is the hundredths place. So if I want to convert this to a percentage, I can just move this decimal place over 2 times, 1, 2, and I end up with 12, which is the same thing as 12%. Okay, now let's go down here and using the mental math way, we have 3 over 25. Now, what I'm going to do for this one, I have a fraction. And then for this particular fraction, I'm going to write it as a fraction with a denominator of 100. Okay? From there, I'm going to convert it to the percentage. Okay? So this is a particular one. Now, they're not always like this, but with 25, I know that it's pretty easy to turn 25 into 100. All I need to do is multiply it by 4. 25 times 4 is equal to 100. So I'm going to do that to the bottom and to the top. Okay, so 25 times 4 is 100. And then I have 3 times 4, which is 12. And then 12 hundredths is the same thing as 12%. And so there we have it. We got the same answer doing it 2 different ways. So depending on the problem, sometimes it's easier to do it one way. Sometimes it's easier to do it the other. So we're just going to, go over a variety of different examples. Okay. So let's go ahead and I want you to try this out. Check it out. We have 3/5. So for this particular way, I want you to take this fraction and you're going to convert it to a decimal using long division. And then once you have it in a decimal, you're going to convert it to a percentage. Okay? Now, for this other way, you're going to, method 2, you're going to start with a fraction. You're going to convert it to a fraction that has a denominator of 100, and then convert it to the percentage. Okay? So we're going to do the same thing. So go ahead and get started on both ways. Okay, so go ahead and press pause. When you finish both ways, press play and we'll talk about the results. All right, see you in a bit. See you in a bit. Okay, we're back. Let's go ahead and figure out what 3/5 is as a percentage. So to do that, we are going to do the long division. 3 divided by 5. So this is 3 divided by 5. Now, can 5 go into 3? No, it can't. So I'm going to add the decimal and add a 0. And then when I add this decimal, it's going to go on top right there, right above it. Okay, now can 5 go into 30? Yes, it can. How many times? Well, it can go in 6 times. 6 times 5 is 30, and there's no remainder, so we're done. Okay, so we know that 3/5 is the same thing as 0.6. Now, I want to convert this to a percentage, so I know that I need, this is in the tenths place, I need something in the hundredths place. Well, there is nothing there, so I'm going to add a 0, okay? So now I have 0.60, and then to convert it to a percentage, I'm just going to move this decimal over 2 places, and then it becomes 60%. All right. So if you got that right, wonderful job. Let's go down to the second method. We're going to take this fraction 3/5. And what I notice about 3/5 is I can turn this pretty easily into something that has a denominator of 100 because I know that I can go 5 times 20. 5 times 20 is equal to 100. So whatever I multiply the bottom to, I have to multiply the top to. The same thing to the top. So 5 times 20 is 100. 3 times 20 is 60. So I end up with 60 over 100, which is the same thing as 60%. So if you got both of those right in both of the different methods, method 1, using a fraction, converting it to a decimal using long division, and then taking that decimal and converting it into a percentage, great job. And if you did, you had the fraction, and then you converted it into a fraction with a denominator of 100, and you got the percentage. Wonderful job. Okay. Let's go ahead and try example 3. Now, example 3, what we're going to be doing is we have a whole bunch of stuff. Sometimes you'll have this, a lot of on different tests and things like that, and what they want us to do is they want us to, these are ordering rational numbers. That's example 3. Now, remember, rational numbers are all of the natural numbers, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, the whole numbers. Remember natural numbers, let's see, natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have, those are the natural numbers, so on, you can keep going. And then you have the whole numbers, which is basically you just add 0 to that. So 0 and then everything there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are all the whole numbers. And then you get the integers. Which add the negative numbers. So, you know, -4, -3, -2, -1, and then 0. And then all of the natural numbers. So those are the integers. And then finally, we end up with the rational numbers, which is what we're talking about here. Now, if you remember, the rational numbers have two characteristics. They can be written as decimals that, number one, they either terminate. So that would be something like 0.25. That's a decimal that terminates. It stops. Or it could be, you know, -4.5. That stops. So it can be a decimal. It can be a fraction, too, that when it's converted to a decimal, the decimal terminates. Or it can be a fraction that when written as a decimal, it repeats. So something like if we had 1/3 and we convert that to a decimal, we get 0.33333333. And so it's repeating. So those are and then rational numbers, they're integers, they're also whole numbers, and they're also natural numbers. So it includes everything. So all of these numbers, when we're talking about ordering rational numbers, we are ordering everything, natural numbers, whole numbers, integers, and fractions that when they're represented as decimals, they either terminate or repeat. Okay? So that's what we're talking about when it says ordering rational numbers. So rational numbers can be written in a variety of ways. They can be written as percentages, they can be written as decimals, or they can be written as fractions. Now, what's difficult is when they're all written in all these different forms, it's hard to compare them, it's hard to order them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these different forms, we're going to convert them to the same thing, which is going to be decimals, and then from there, we're going to order them. So it says order 17%, 0.25, 3/4, 0.1, 4/5, and 20% from least to greatest. So step 1, write the numbers as decimals with the same number of decimal places. So here we have a percentage. Let's go ahead and write this one as a decimal. Well, we know that 17%, there's two different ways, so I'll just go over both of them. 17% is the same thing as 17 over 100, which would be 17 100ths, which is the same thing as 17 100ths would be 0.17. That's the tenths place, that's the hundredths place, 17 100ths, okay? So that is the decimal. Now, another way I do this is when I'm converting a percentage to a decimal, is I do the opposite. So back here on example 1, we're converting a decimal to percentage, right? We had a decimal, we are converting it to a percentage, so we move the decimal 2 places to the right. Well, when you go backwards and you go from a percentage to a decimal, so when you go from a percentage to a decimal, you do the opposite. You move 2 places to the left. So sometimes that's a quicker way to do it when you have a percentage. So 17%, here's the decimal. I'm going to move 2 places to the left. 1, 2, the decimal's there, so my decimal equivalent is 0.17. So 2 different ways of getting the same thing, okay? Perfect. So this one right here, 0.25, well, that's already in a decimal form, which is what we want, 0.25. So that's perfect. We have 3/4. So this is a fraction. We want to write it as a decimal. So I'm going to go ahead and do long division on this one. 3, this is 3 divided by 4. 3 divided by 4. Does 4 go into 3? No, it does not. So I need to add the decimal and add a 0. Does 4 go into 30? Yes, it does. How many times? 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. Then I subtract. I got to borrow there. 10 take away 8 is 2. Then I add a 0 and drop it down. 4 goes into 25 times. So now I have the decimal 0.75, which is what I need. Okay? The other way to do this would be to recognize that 3/4, I can turn that into a denominator of 100 if I multiply it by 25 to the bottom and to the top. So 4 times 25 is 100. 3 times 25 is 75. And then I have, well, that would be a percentage, but 75 100ths is the same thing as 0.75. So that's the same, a different way to do the same thing, but I would probably choose to do it this way right here. Okay. The next one is 0.1. Now here we have 2 decimal places, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So this only has 1 decimal place, so we want to go ahead and write it with 2 decimal places. So to do that, there's nothing there, we just add a 0. Okay, so boom, we're done, 0.10. Okay, and then we have 4/5. I'm going to go ahead and do the long division here, which is 4 divided by 5. Okay, 4 divided by 5. Can 5 go into 4? No, it cannot. So I'm going to add that 0 and put the decimal place right there. Can 5 go into 40? Yes, it can. 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40, and then we subtract, and we get no remainder. So we end up with 0.8. Now, all of these have 2 decimal places, so I need to make sure that this answer has 2 decimal places as well. 1, 2. So I'm going to add that 0, and my answer is 0.80. Okay? Then I have 20%. I know that when, from doing the previous, if I want to go from a percentage to a decimal, all I have to do is move 2 places to the left. So here's the decimal, that's what I'm going to do. Move 2 places to the left, and I'm left with 0.20. Okay, so now I have converted all of these different things, percentages, decimals, fractions, to the same thing. I've converted them all to decimals where there's 2 place values in each. They're all written in the hundredths place. So now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and graph them, okay? So the first one, 0.17. So if you look at my number line here, it's in tenths, right? This is 0, this is 0.10, 0.20, 0.30, 40, 50, 0.60, all the way up to 1 and 1.10, 1.20. So I'm just going to graph these. Now some of them, since it's in tenths, I might have to estimate, so that's what I'm going to do. So the first one right here, 0.17, that is going to be between 0.10 and 0.20, and it's going to be right about here. Okay, so that's going to be 0.17. Then we're going to do 0.25. Now 0.25 is going to be between 0.20 and 0.30, and it's going to be halfway between. So this is 0.25. The next one would be right here, 0.75. We're going to go all the way down here between 0.70 and 0.80, and it's going to be halfway in between there. So I have 0.75. Then I'm going to go here to 0.10, which is just right there, 0.10. And then we have 0.80, which is here. And lastly, we have 0.20, which would be right here. That's 0.20, okay? Now, when you're ordering things from least to greatest, this over here, this is where the smallest numbers are, least to greatest over here. So whatever point is the further to the left, that's going to be the smallest. So it's going to be 0.10, 0.17, 0.02, 0.25, 0.75, 0.08, 0.8, and then, yeah, that's it. So now we're going to write them. But when I write them, I'm not going to write them as the decimals that I converted. I'm going to write with the original thing that they gave me. So when I'm looking at 0.10, this is the least one. Okay, I'm going to write, this was in the form of 0.1. So I'm going to write my answer like that, 0.1. Okay, then I'm going to move to 0.17, which was right here, which was originally 17%. Okay, then I go to 0.20, which is here, which was originally 20%. Then I go to 0.25, which was just 0.25, so that was the same. After 0.25, I moved to 0.75, which was the same thing as 3/4. And then we had 0.80 right here, which was the same thing as 4/5. And then I'm just going to count up all the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they're all represented here. We did them right. This is how you write the answer with the numbers that the problem originally gave you. Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and try another example. Right here, check it out, example 3. I want you to go ahead and try this one on your own. You're going to go through the same process that we just did. You're going to convert these all to decimals to have the same place. So order 12%, 0.20, 1/2, 0.8, 3/4, and 40% from least to greatest. Okay? So where is my friend? Oh, and then you're going to graph them on the number line and then write the original numbers from least to greatest. Where's my friend? Oh, there's the pause dragon, reminding you to pause. And when you get done with the whole thing, press play and we'll see how you did. Okay, see you in a bit. All right, we're back. Let's go ahead and write these numbers as decimals with the same number of decimal places. So this first one, I'm going to go from a percentage to a decimal. So I'm just going to move 2 places to the left, and I end up with 0.12. Okay, this one has 2 decimal places, so we are perfect. Right there's our answer. 1/2, I'm going to go ahead and use long division on this one. It's going to be 1 divided by 2. Can 2 go into 1? No, so I need to add a decimal, add 0. Can 2 go into 10? Yes, 5 times, and 5 times 2 is 10. With no remainder, I'm done. So I have 0.5, but I need 2 decimal places. I only have 1. So to get to 1, 2, I'm going to have to add a 0. So my answer ends up being 0.50. Okay, now I have 0.8, which is wonderful, but I need 2 decimal places, which means I'm going to add a 0 there. So I have 0.80 is my answer. 3/4, I'm going to have to do the long division. This is 3 divided by 4. 3 divided by 4. Does 4 go into 3? No, it does not. I'm going to add the decimal and add the 0. Does 4 go into 30? Yes, it does. How many times? 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. Then I subtract. I have to borrow here. Make that a 2. Put the 1 there. 10 take away 8 is 2. I have a remainder, so I need to add a 0 and then drop it down. And 4 goes into 25 times. 5 times 4 is 20. There's no remainder, so I know that I'm done. So 3/4 is the same thing as 0.75. And then 40%, I'm going to go ahead and move that decimal place over twice, which is going to give me 0.40. Okay, so now I have all of my decimal equivalents that have the same amount of decimal places. So I'm going to put these, graph these decimals on my number line, remembering that these numbers to the left are the least and these ones to the right are the greatest. Okay, so the first one is going to be 0.12. 0.12 is between 0.10 and 0.20. So it's going to be right about there. That is 0.12. Then I'm going to move to 0.20. Pretty straightforward. That's just right there on 0.20. Then I'm going to go to 0.50. Another one that's really nice. It's right there on 0.50. Followed by 0.80, which would be right here. Perfect. Followed by 0.75, which is halfway between 0.70 and 0.80. That is 0.75. And our last one, 0.40, would be right here on 0.40. So now I'm ready. This is the least, and then it just moves this way to the greatest. So I'm ready to write them, but remember when we write our answers, we have to use the original format that the problem gave us. So here, when we're doing 0.12, that is our least. We're going to order them from least to greatest. So 0.12, the original format was 12%. Followed by 0.20. 0.20 is here, and the original format was just, 0.20. Followed by 0.40. 0.40 is here. The original format was 40%, so that's what I'm going to write. Then I go to 0.50, which is here. The original format was 1/2. Followed by 0.75, which is here. The original format was 3/4. And lastly, 0.80 is here, and the original format was 0.8. So if you got those right, great job. All right, let's move on to our last example, example 4. Okay, this is an application. So what example 4 says is if 27 out of 50 people have the newspaper delivered to their home, what % of these people have the newspaper delivered to their home? So 27 out of 50, that information right there is actually giving us a fraction. 27 out of 50 can be written just like this, 27 out of 50. Now we need to convert this to a percentage. Now what I notice about this one is that I can convert this to a denominator of 100 pretty quickly. I could do it using long division, right? But I think that this problem will be easier done if I just get a fraction with 100 on the denominator, and I can do that by just multiplying the bottom and the top by 2. 50 times 2 is 100, and then I just need to do 27 times 2, which would be 2 times 7 is 14, carry the 1, 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So 54 out of 100 would end up being 54%. Okay? So what percentage of people have the newspaper delivered to their home? 54% of the people have the newspaper delivered to their home. Right there. All right, perfect. Now it is your turn to check it out. So here's our friend the pause dragon, reminding you to pause your device, work out, check it out, example 4. When you get done, press play and we'll talk about it. All right, see you in a bit. See you in a bit. Okay, we are back with check it out example 4. It states if 10 out of the 50 students have blue backpacks, what percentage of the students have blue backpacks? Well, what you need to recognize is when it gives you this 10 out of 50 students, that's giving you a fraction. So 10 out of 50 is the same as 10 out of 50. Now, to convert this into a percent, which is what we need to do, we could use long division and go 10 divided by 50, but I see that it would be really, really easy to make this fraction into a denominator of 100, which we can then change to a percentage. So that's what I'm going to do. I know 50 times 2 is 100. Okay, whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 10 times 2 is 20. I have 20 out of 100, which is the same thing as 20%. All right, if you got that one right, yokedeki mashita, you did a great job, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.